Good morning, everyone, and we're here in NAFCU's Arlington headquarters today with NAFCU President CEO Fred Becker on the anniversary of his arrival here 11 years ago. Good
Seems
morning.
like yesterday.
Yes.
Welcome to the NAFCU building.
Thank you. Now, over those 11 years, how has your job changed and how have credit unions changed?
Well, I think the job's changed dramatically. It seems like everybody's running like a little mouse in a cage trying to keep up. Obviously, the economy's been through tremendous changes over the past 3 years. We're still not out of it. I like to say that credit unions are the foundation of the industry, but as a result of being the foundation of industry, when a storm passes, there's still leaking into the foundation. And credit unions are still coming out of the crisis that we went through, and it will be another year or two before we've fully come out of it, and the economy still begins to just recover marginally.
Now, what have been some of NAFCU's accomplishments under your tenure?
Oh, I think that we've done a lot, if you think about it. We've developed a very good relationship with the regulator. I know there is contentious times with the regulator in these days, but as I noted from somebody making a statement this morning, Bill Rissell at Fort Knox, there's also contentious times in the banking industry. I think regardless of the regulator today, these are contentious times, regardless of where you are, if you have a federal regulator or a state regulator, the times are contentious.
Now, you mentioned contentious a couple of times. How in particular, any regs in particular you're working with the agency on? Any exam issues I know have come up for your organization?
Yeah, exam issues are a tremendous issue right now. Anthony Demagon, our Director of Regulatory Compliance, when we saw last year that credit unions were having issues with the compliance issues, and I should have said Vice President of Regulatory Compliance rather than Director.
Recent promotion, yes.
Yeah, recent promotion. Did a nice white paper to help credit unions through this system. The white paper was widely acclaimed by NCUA as well as by the credit unions who've used it, and we've made it free and available to the whole credit union industry, not just NAFCU's members, because we're all going through this together, and the losses that we go through affect each one of us.
Now, again, over your 11 years, anything you might have done differently?
I don't think there's a lot would have done differently. When I came here, Bob Sinkler, who runs Minnesota Life, said to me, just put your head down and go forward and keep going. And that was the best advice he could have given me, or anybody could have given me. I think you just put your head down and go forward. Obviously, we've made a tremendous transition with the staff. We were seen when I came as just primarily focusing on regulatory issues, and we were seen as focusing primarily on conferences. And I think everyone now recognizes we have the most seasoned lobbying staff in the credit union industry. Brad Thaler has been here the longest, our Vice President of Legislative Affairs. Dan Berger does a marvelous job, as does Kerry Hunt and Anthony Demagon. And so we've really made a huge transition in being a leader in the industry, regardless of whether it's a conference, a regulatory issue, or a legislative issue.
Now, over the last few years, obviously, have been difficult times for credit unions, gotten them to see beyond their own four walls. Now, what do you think are the top 2 to 3 issues for credit unions?
I think the top issue here is one, and that is reinventing the business model. For the past year, we have been saying that the legislative and regulatory and economic pressures are going to create a very different environment for all financial institutions going forward. And the credit unions have to step back and take a hard look at their business model and their strategic planning sessions and discuss it at each board meeting and figure out how they're going to adapt to the future, because the future is going to be very different than it is today.
What about particular issues like supplemental capital, member business lending, still on the radar for credit unions and in Congress?
Yes, absolutely. Still on the radar for credit unions. Matter of fact, we expect this week Senator Udall to introduce an amendment, or a bill, I should say, with regard to member business lending. I would point out that that member business lending legislation that we expect Senator Udall to introduce is fairly restrictive. One of the issues I think we have in the industry is some are very concerned that we'll have, as a result of credit unions getting into increased member business lending, a future situation like we did with the corporates, where we'll have to pay through it through the insurance fund. But if you take a hard look at that legislation, it's very restrictive, all right, or what we expect to be the legislation. Very restrictive as to the experience level and who can do it. And I encourage the whole industry to get behind it. I think one of the problems we're having today is some credit unions want supplemental capital, some credit unions want member business lending, but they're not binding together to support each other on their various issues. And going forward, there's going to have to be some generalized support to move these things forward.
Have you seen more dissension in the industry, more division?
I think that I wouldn't say division or dissension, I would say more people questioning. All right, and the questioning, don't get me wrong, is good. I think one of the problems that led to the corporate situation is everybody just trusted the corporates as opposed to keeping a watch of what was going on, and that led to the crisis. We may have been able to prevent it if people being paid more attention to what was going on, what the corporates were investing in, etc. And so it's a good thing that people are questioning. I think, but when they question, I think they have to take a hard look at it and come to a resolution, listen and have a discourse back and forth.
And one of the organizations that has taken some of the heat for that corporate debacle has been the NCUA. Is the agency making the right moves to ensure that it has the expertise on staff, whether it be corporates or member business lending?
I think they're hiring the new examiners. I don't know the criteria for which they're hiring the new examiners. Clearly, the NCUA is partially responsible for what happened. I don't buy the excuse that a regulator couldn't do something because it's not legislatively or regulatory written in stone.
Right.
If they see things going south, they had the ability to step in. At the same time, I do think the corporate stabilization, they had to do that. It did preserve the system, and they had no choice but to do that at that time. As to where we end up with the corporates, that remains to be seen. We'll certainly know by this September. I think it's NAFCU's position since the beginning, and I'm glad that others now are adopting it, as this is up to the member owners of the corporates to determine under the rules and regulations set forth by NCUA, not someone else to say, corporates, this is the way it ought to look like in the future in a dictatorial manner.